We can't get a number. It's Ruben Garcia.
Has come outside of the racetrack into the corner of really the corner of the grandstand.
Oh boy, it's a miracle that the car did not go into an area of spectators right down here. This is right to the left of, rather the right of our broadcast booth, and it's an area where there is no guardrail. There is an opening as the cars come off of corner number 9 before the guardrail begins to protect the spectators here on the front stretch. And he has crashed through a tire barrier and is also right in front of the scoring stand.
And it looks like that's a place that it looked like it would be impossible to get into, Bob, with the race car, but don't know what position he got into that threw him over in that direction. Let's see if we can pick it up and see what did happen as he's coming off of the track. He's out of control as we see him coming across there.
Now watch him.
He hits that barrier, just the corner of it, and the car goes up into the air, hits the other concrete wall barrier there, and right in, almost into the spectator area. And you can see the spectators scrambling for safety. It looks like, from our vantage point here, that they were okay, thank God.
They sure did scramble to get out of the way, though, as he broke through a concrete barrier. But it appears as if, and we haven't received any word from any of the safety officials, but it appears as if everybody is okay. There was some catch fencing there protecting the racetrack from the spectators. Let's go to Dick Berggren.
Bob, from my vantage point, that looks like exactly what happened.
Okay, we continue with our NASCAR marathon. We are at Riverside, and we just witnessed a crash involving Ruben Garcia. And that was pretty scary because he almost went into the crowd.
I mean, what is it with these crashes? The last time we saw Bobby Allison in the fence at Talladega, and now Ruben Garcia jumps the guardrail coming off turn 9 at Riverside and into the crowd.
And it's a very unusual accident. He tore through a set of guardrails and into some concrete block and came very close to going into a spectator area. The NASCAR fields are just going to have to do something to make a barrier down there and protect these spectators from any possible other crash that might occur. It was just off of corner number 9, and so it appears as if the red is coming out. Indeed it is, and we're going to be stopped here for a while, and NASCAR is going to have to determine what they can do to keep the spectators safe.
And Dick Berggren is down. Ruben Garcia is walking across the racetrack, and he's just about to Dick Berggren. Now let's go down in that area.
Well, Ruben Garcia, most importantly, are you all right? You look all right.
Well, you know, the worst thing about it, you know, I was taking that Pick Your Part Quaker State Chevrolet Monte Carlo out there, and I thought I was doing really good, you know, and we were running right there about 18th, and the car, we were having trouble all day long with the car, but something broke, you know, and I don't know what happened. I'm just sorry that I'm out of this last race. I'm really proud of, you know, 9 out of 9 times I've been able to come out here and race in this race, and it's really sad that it happened to me. I'm really, really sad about it.
But you still managed to get a smile when you jumped out of the car and everybody was okay.
Hey, listen, I love LA, and that's what it's all about.
And this gentleman is one of the true gentlemen, one of the real sportsmen of this automobile racing area. He helps an awful lot of other racers who are down on their luck. He's a self-made man. He has sponsored more than dozens of cars for people who would like to race but just can't afford to do so.
So Ruben Garcia is okay. Meanwhile, the cars are rolling to a stop here on the main street.
So he's coming to your right side of the way. 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, I'm Rick Crow, and this is Short Track Stories. Here we are with another episode of Short Track Stories, the first one I've done on the road, and I'm sitting in the home of Ruben Garcia, and what an honor it is to be here with you today, Ruben. I'm glad you invited me into your home. We've had a little conversation going on, and you know, I want to start with thanking you for your service and to this great nation. Like I said, I have a couple boys that serve, and welcome to Short Track Stories. It's great to have you on.
Well, thank you for asking me. I'm proud to be on your show. It's always fun for me to relive some of the things that I've done in my life, and of course, NASCAR Winston West and Winston Cup racing was probably the epitome of what a person can achieve, and I'm really proud that I did what I did. My family's proud of me too, and that's important.
We'll talk about that. So I did a little bit of research on you, and I know you grew up in El Monte, which I've been to El Monte even today, and it's not probably the safest place to go. But so let's talk about you said that your mom was illegal. What was your father? They were both immigrants. Where did they immigrate
No,
from?
my dad, believe it or not, was born in Bisbee, Arizona, and I actually had, of my 4 grandparents, 3 of them were born in Mexico and 1 was born in Colorado. But my dad quit high school when he was like 16 years old, and my grandfather made my dad go to work in the copper mine. In fact, we were there a few months ago, and I saw some of the registry there, and my dad's name is there, working in the copper mines. And then both of my grandfathers also worked in that same copper mine.
In Colorado?
No, this is in Bisbee, Arizona.
In Arizona.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And so where was your mom from?
My mom was from Janos, Chihuahua. Janos is spelled with a J, Jones.
And so Mexico.
Yeah, Mexico, yeah.
And so she was here illegally, and you guys, they ended up in El Monte, which is where they settled their roots down. And what was El Monte like back when your folks came?
Let me back up just a little bit. My folks actually immigrated into the Arizona area, Douglas, Bisbee, those towns, Superior. They lived in those towns when they were growing up in their teens and their 20s, so on and so forth, until they branched out. They ended up in Phoenix. My mom and dad are originally from Phoenix. Then we moved, when I was 7 years old, we moved permanently to Los Angeles and lived with my grandmother. She had a house in back of her house, and then my dad worked for Kaiser Aluminum. He got hurt, got a settlement, and bought 2 homes in South El Monte, in Garvey Acres, kind of across the street from the Starlight Drive-In on Rosemead Boulevard. And it's kind of a famous place now. I think they still have swap meets there. But El Monte was very rural at that time. I mean, there was still a lot of farming going on. Flowers were farmed there, where Lake is at now. And great neighborhood, though. Great place to live. We never locked our doors. And all the kids got together and we would ride our motorcycles. We'd go up Rosemead Boulevard, past San Gabriel Boulevard, go collect beer bottles and Coke bottles so we could get some money to get sweets. We had a large family. My family was 6 kids. Funny thing about that, something that I think is really important in a way in my life, is that my siblings, all of them smoked. My parents smoked. I'm the only one that never smoked.
Good for you.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, we're probably the same way at my house.
That's wild.
So I knew the Kaisers. It's interesting. The Kaiser Steel family grew up with some of their, I would imagine, great-grandkids or whatever. So would that be where Fontana Raceway was built? The same spot? A different location?
It was in Los Angeles somewhere, but I don't remember where.
Right. So I read that when you went to school or you started school at El Monte, you only knew about 5 words of English.
No. We're talking about kindergarten, not even kindergarten. We didn't have kindergarten in Phoenix when I turned 5. We only had first grade. So I had to wait till I was 6 years old to go to first grade. And then we moved here to East Los Angeles, and I'm not kidding you. I knew more than 5 words. I probably knew 150 words of English. A great story, though, I got to tell you, when I was in 2nd grade, the way I ended up with the name Ruben Garcia, my first name was Francisco. And in 2nd grade, there was 2 Francisco Garcias. But the other kid didn't know his middle name, and they asked me, well, do you have a middle name? And I go, yes, I do. Well, what is it? It's Ruben. And since that day forward, I went home that night and I told my parents, hey, I've got a new name. My name is Ruben now.
And so that's your famous name.
Yes, but they never called me Ruben for probably 2 or 3 years, not until I progressed through grade school.
Right. And Ruben compared to Francisco.
Yeah, I
Right.
never liked Francisco, but my dad was a Francisco. So
You were a junior.
Yeah,
also.
I wasn't a junior. His
No.
name was Francisco Jose Garcia, which, by the way, he flat obliterated the Jose portion, so he got to be known as Frank J. Garcia his whole life. He didn't like Jose. He didn't like being
let's
called
talk
Jose.
about that. Like, there's a reason behind that, right?
Oh yeah.
And what do you know what the reason was?
Well, I'm sure when my dad went in the service, he still was known as Francisco Jose Garcia, and I'm sure the racist, the way the Army was racist at the time, I'm sure they were calling him Jose. So, and I never heard the story from my dad, but I'm just assuming that's
Right.
what happened.
Probably correctly
He
so.
didn't want to be called Jose, and he changed his name to
So, what wars did your father serve in?
World War II. He was in Europe for over 2 years. And then from there, he's on his way home on a troop ship, coming home, and they changed his journey in his career to the Philippines. So he had to serve another 4 or 5 months in the Philippines before he got to come home. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we talked about your father, the greatest generation. I'm not. It's funny because I do some research on it, and I'm not so. Then what would you call the Vietnam vets, right? The second greatest generation, because they got treated terrible by their own country too, so we both know why your dad manipulated his name a little bit, and we heard the story about you and yours. Were you ever, I don't really know the right way to ask this question, so were you ever ashamed of being Hispanic, or is that what you consider yourself? Because I know a lot of South Americans, they're not Hispanics, right? They're, let's just say, different skin color. Was there a point where your dad was like, no, we're not doing it? Like, he came home from World War II and he was like, I'm an American now and it doesn't matter and we can all do whatever we want to do? Or at what point in your life did somebody say, doesn't matter, Ruben, you can do what you want to, you can do what you want to do if you work hard?
Well, I probably shouldn't say this. But my dad and my mom, they never told us we couldn't be Americans. They never wanted us to speak Spanish. It was something that you could do if you wanted to. I ended up taking Spanish in high school 2 years because I wanted to learn to read and write it more than anything else. I still am bilingual today. I'm not 100% or even 80%, but I can still carry on a conversation. That's one thing I can really say that I'm proud of. My parents never held us back. I never experienced a lot of discrimination, really.
let me back up for just clarify one thing. Were you home from Vietnam when you were in the band, or was that?
I ended up going back to playing in bands in nightclubs when I got back from Vietnam.
So the band that you toured with post Vietnam or pre Vietnam?
No, pre-Vietnam.
Wow.
65.
Wow. So
I got to tell you this story though, because it's kind of important. It's always been important to me. When I got my draft notice, I got it on Christmas Eve, 1965, and 2 days later, I get a phone call from a leader of one of the top bands in East Los Angeles. The band was called the VIPs, which in fact ended up being El Chicano. They wanted my guitar player. And Freddie Sanchez, the leader, says, "Hey, can I borrow Mickey Lesprone? We need him. We need a good lead guitar player. And then when you come back from Vietnam, we'll give him back to you." Well, they never gave him back to me, And they went on to record 8 albums. And Mickey Lesprone, the lead guitar player, wrote probably 30-40% of the songs, the instrumentals in those albums.
wow.
Yeah, he was my best friend. We're still in contact.
So he was a musician. Like when you're recording, a lot of people don't know about like what a session musician is compared to a road musician on an album and stuff. But if you're recording stuff in different tracks, you're a musician, like to me.
He was a great guitar player. He emulated Wes Montgomery. He took a lot of that style and incorporated that into their music. He's done really well for himself. He's a good kid.
Ah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, what year were you born, Ruben?
46.
So 65, you were what, 19 years old? So did you had to register for the draft when you got to be 18. I had to register for a draft too, but in my mind, I'm thinking the chances of me, when you registered, you knew what was going on back then in high school. You were seeing it on the news and stuff. So you knew your destiny. At what age did you know your destiny was probably going to be Vietnam, or were you going to serve no matter what?
I knew it in my graduating year, 64. I knew that. I knew I was going to end up in Vietnam. I don't know. You just know, And the funny part is that when I got my draft notice, man, you talk about a shock,
Christmas Eve.
Yeah, Christmas Eve. And
so were you always going to serve in the military because your pops did, or... That wasn't going to be...
No. I didn't know what I was going to do. Yeah.
So basically, how long were you in the military, Ruben?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
So you come back home, and I don't want to discard that, but I want to be, appreciative of it, but I want to be respectful of it too. I know some guys talk about it, some guys don't. So you came back 2 years in the service, and you and your brother started... which is crazy because I had a whole different perception in my mind of how you got into that industry and what you did in that industry. To think that you guys started it probably in your garage or your backyard or something.
We actually rented a small. There was a factory next to us that wasn't being used, and Harvest Industries owned the property and they weren't using it. And so we leased it, it was $500 a month or something, very, very reasonable. And we started building our campers and van conversions there. And I have to tell you at this time, the reason that all happened was that Jack Sneed which ended up being one of the partners of Suncrest Motorhomes. He's the one that let us start our small little company there, knowing that someday a company might be in competition with them, Jack Sneed I owe a lot to him.
What did they have?
Jack Sneed was vice president of Harvest Industries, and they built campers, nothing but campers.
Like truck campers or
yes, truck campers. I mean, okay. From an 8-footer to a 12-foot self-contained. Yeah.
What did they go on to become? Because I've never heard of Harvest.
They ended up building a Class A motorhome, and it didn't really do well. And I think they were owned by Harvest Industry. I think they were a company that was involved in grain of some kind back in Louisiana.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, back in Louisiana.
So were they bought by like Thor or somebody else, or they just
Probably,
kind of rode off into the
they
sunset?
finally closed down at, I'm going to guess in 77, 78. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Well, we started this small company, but I have to tell you the way it worked. We just didn't have enough money to sustain the business. I mean, we started with $6,000, and the next thing you know, we've got $20,000 worth of inventory to build what we're building, and we don't have the money to pay that inventory off. You know, we have to turn things. So Jack Sneed by this time had quit Harvest Industries, and he approached me about throwing in with them and to see if we wanted to be a part of Midland Motorhomes. And Midland Motorhomes, by the way, sponsored Ray Elder's race car for a couple of years. But so I said, well, what's in it for us? You know, I've got 10 employees and I've got all this equipment. He goes, throw in with us and we'll make you corporate officer, secretary, treasurer, and Oscar will be one of the main designers, and we'll give you 10% of the company.
So you guys, this guy helps you out with what was the name of the business?
Midland Motorhomes.
Midland, and I think I'm starting to remember the Midland motorhome part. What year was that? Kind of
79 and 78 and 79, I believe.
How did you meet? How did you meet? Rest in peace.
Who?
The great one, Ron Esau.
Oh my God. Well, this is in 1984. I decide, this is a year after the Camaro. I decide to race Winston West because I had raced 2 races with Ray Elder's Dodge Aspen, one at Mesa Marin and one race at Sears Point.
In a Ray Elder car.
Well, Ray Elder was the driver of that car. He didn't own the car. Midland Motorhomes owned those cars. And I was one of the owners of Midland Motorhomes. So in 79, Ray, of course, decided he didn't want to race with us anymore. Or we decided to get out of it because it was a little expensive. And we had 2 cars. One that we had leased, a Plymouth Volare, and then we had the Dodge Aspen that we owned. So we had them there, and I decided
At your shop.
at our shop. So I said, why not? You know, why don't
Right.
I go out and try it now?
Why not try Ontario too?
I
while you're at it?
hired, no, we didn't. But I hired Bill Morehart, which was Ray Elder's crew chief at the time also, along with Ray's brother. And Bill helped me, a great guy. He's a good friend of mine today. So we go to Mesa Marin, and we race Winston West race. And I finished 7th in the 100-lap race on the lead lap.
So your first race, other
79.
than SCCA car stuff, you go to Mesa half mile, pretty fast track, and see, it fascinates me because Bill Sedgwick was racing like figure eights at Saugus and then went to Ontario like a week later in a West car. Like, oh, I'll just go try that.
Billy's a good friend of mine.
Like you guys were fearless. You were just crazy. I can't imagine.
Well, you have to understand, I raced motorcycles in the desert, and there's probably something, I can't think of anything that's more dangerous than that.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
You know, skydiving, maybe, or, you know, it's crazy.
Right.
So I had the speed You know, it wasn't that.
You had the feel, you had the no fear.
But it was kind of different getting in the car. It was strange, you know. But it was, oh man, it was so much fun.
It's quiet, huh?
You know, I look back at it, and more than anything else, I think of what I did at Riverside. You know, I out-qualified Richard Petty 3 times there in 9 races. And it's in the record books. You know, I looked it up the other day because I wasn't sure.
Hell yeah.
You know,
I'd look it up too.
And so you think about that, and it was scary. I mean, the first time I went there, it was our first race of 1984. That was going to be my first Cup race. And you talk about, I mean, I was sick to my stomach. I was thrown up before the race started. That's how nervous I was. And, but before that, let me tell you how qualifying went. Ron Esau, I bought the car that Ron Esau had driven for the Lees, Jack and Jim Lee, the year before, in '83. I bought that car, well, not knowing it was set up for a short track. I mean, I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know anything about that race car geometry. Junior Baxter should have known, and we go to Riverside, and the car, it won't turn. You know, it's the geometry's messed up.
Yeah.
So I go to Ron Esau Thursday. Hey, Ron, something's wrong with the car, man. It doesn't go through the S's, you know. He says, well, I'll send Jerry Baxter over, because Jerry Baxter was crew chiefing for him in that race. So I'll send Jerry over there. So Jerry comes over there after practice on Thursday, and he says, don't worry about it, Ruben. I'll come over here tonight, and I'll fix it. That night, he comes over, or they close the garage at 5. You have to leave, but before 5, he went in there. He's cutting the shock mounts off the car. So he gets halfway done, and Friday you had to qualify, or you're not going to be allowed to qualify again on Saturday. They had 2-day qualifying then. So I had to go out and run with 4 shocks instead of 8 shocks on my Cup car. And I'm going through the S's, you know, on the cars. But
let's, hold on. What do you mean 4 shocks instead of 8 shocks?
We had 8 shocks on our Cup car.
2 shocks on every corner?
Yep.
Seriously?
That changed, by the way. So I qualify, and I run a 137 something, you know, way in the heck and gone. So he fixes the car. I go out to qualify Saturday, and the car's fixed up. I had already driven it in practice, and Junior Baxter's girlfriend is sitting up with some of the James Hilton and James Warren and, you know, DK Eldridge and some of these guys. They're all up watching in the scorer's booth, and they're watching the cars go around. And one of the old-time guys says, don't worry about this number 32 car. You know, he went a 138 or something, you know. And then just at that time, my car comes stop finish line, and Brennan, at the time, her name was Brennan Baxter. She goes, you guys are going to have to worry now, because he just did a 125 something or another, you know, and I was second fastest on the second day, you know, so that was really, really awesome. It was really a great deal for me.
So to clear something up too, because some of my listeners may not understand the whole, because they've diluted how Winston West, Winston Cup, Arca Menards. I mean, you guys, the West guys, Ray Elder, he's buried under some snot-nosed kid rental car now, and went under Arca Menards that didn't even exist back then, right? They've just, what they've done to the West drivers is just a travesty to your guys' heritage, to your that's why I started doing these podcasts. So you're talking, and I looked, there's a lot of West guys that never made a Cup start. You have Winston Cup statistics. So you're talking, you had some West laps. When you some guys would say when I out-qualified Richard Petty, people would assume that was in a West race when they split them. You raced Cup. How do you feel about that?
Well,
don't be humble.
No, that's the greatest accomplishment in my life, no doubt. no doubt. And I, I'm not afraid to tell people, that I meet new people that I was a race car driver and that I made that race nine times in a row. Granted, I was a provisional twice, but I was there. And the reason I got those provisional spots over some of the East Coast guys is because I was in the top 4 or 5 of Winston West standings. And that's how you got the provisionals. We got to the garage, being in the garage area next to Elliott, the year that he was going for the championship, next to Darrell Waltrip, three garages over from Dale Earnhardt because of what we were doing in Winston West. We were that high up in the standings.
How did those guys look at you or treat you? Or is that how those are the West guys?
It's really, that's the other part about why I'm so proud of what I did, is that they treated me like they treated anybody else that they were racing
Just all
against.
racers.
Dale Earnhardt would walk by me and, "Hey, Ruben sandwich,"
And so from Earnhardt, that's a badge of honor.
That's the
right?
top. That's the best,
You would have taken Jose from Earnhardt.
Hell yeah.
Because it was Earnhardt.
And it's second.
That's right.
They were pulling Elliott's engine out of his car that day before he was going for the championship the next day, excuse me. And they're using my engine hoist. They're pulling his engine with my engine hoist, and it says RGR 32 on it.
Right.
And I had that photo and the sun setting, so it's all cast in orange, right? It's
in Suncrest
one
orange?
of the photo, and it's one of the best photos I ever had.
I have to see that before I leave.
I don't have it.
Oh!
I loaned it to a promoter of the Tacoma race. They never returned the photos.
Oh, those guys.
And the person that took the photo, she was working for me, and she was using this guy's camera, and I was never able to get back to that guy as hard as I tried for 3 or 4 years. And he has that film somewhere. Oh, God, that photo was awesome. Unbelievable.
I can only imagine. Yeah. That was back in, in the early days. And I have some feelings about the earlier days where I've kind of flipped the script where they would call you guys field fillers, right? I don't buy that. That's NASCAR narrative, but my mom took me to Riverside to see Jimmy Insolo. I didn't have a clue. I mean, when you think about the first NASCAR race wasn't even televised till the late 80s. We would go to Riverside, we would go to Ontario. I didn't have a clue who Dale Earnhardt was. Or Richard Petty. We had no exposure to them if you weren't reading a newspaper, and I was a kid. The people that I went to see were the Jim Robinsons, basically the guys from Saugus for us, and Mesa, And you and I have joked about, I told you one time, we make you take a DNA test because for some reason other than Jimmy Insolo, my mom was in love with Ruben Garcia. I can see why, because you're just a charismatic, great guy. But after doing some research about you and stuff, my mom was more of an underdog fighter. You had beautiful equipment, and she probably looked at you as an underdog, And I remember sitting in the bleachers when you came off the track at Riverside, and it looked like you aimed for somewhere that was going to be the least amount of pain. And that is a famous. Do you know that that's rated in the top 50 moments of racing history crashes?
No, I didn't know that.
It's 42.
I'll be darned.
42. There's videos of it all over the internet, just that part, But
I've seen it a lot of times.
And does it feel the same every time,
Yeah, the story about when I crashed, the bolt that holds the steering shaft onto the steering gear, somebody forgot to put that in because we had to change motors 3 times that day.
And you had to pull your whole shaft out for that.
Yes. And what happens is when you got to restart, you cinch your belts up, okay, And as you're coming to take the green flag, the last thing you do coming down the straightaway is you cinch your belts up and then you pull on your steering wheel. Because you know how the little lock is on your steering wheel to take it off. Well, you want to make sure that's locked.
Yep.
So what I was doing is I was pulling the dang steering column off the steering gear because the bolt wasn't there.
Got you.
So here I am. I didn't know that. So when in the first or second lap, when I come around, I'm coming out of turn 9 and the steering wheel goes like that, just turns. And I said the famous saying, "OF."
Right.
This is gonna hurt. And the car hits the wall, and my understanding from reports of our pit guys, that it flew up in the air about 6-8 feet in this kind of an angle, and then it landed on the right rear corner. And the impact knocked me out, kind of. And that's when the car took a set, and then it went right through the opening there where the rescue vehicles normally, safety vehicles normally.
Yeah.
Okay, and then it went through the chain link fence. No, it went through the Armco barrier, those galvanized barriers. It went through that first, then the chain link fence, then the block wall. So here I am, and there's dust and dirt and stuff, and I'm laying like this, and Doc Pennington, the SCCA doctor, which was a friend of mine, he ended up being a great, super, super nice guy. So he says, Ruben, are you okay? And I go, Doc, just give me a minute. I think I'm all right. Well, I ended up breaking a rib where one of the belts dug in and broke this rib. I didn't know this until 3-4 days later, but I finally climbed out, and that's when you saw the interview with Chris Conamacki,
Famous.
Yeah.
No wraparound seats back then, no headrest.
No.
You'd have been better off on your Botaco seat.
The amazing part is that my helmet hit the roll bar. Okay? Mm-hmm. We take the car back to our shop, and we cinch myself in that seat, and I loosen the belts up, okay, to try and get more movement. That's as close as I could come to that roll bar. That tells you how much your neck stretches.
Yeah.
In that impact.
Yeah.
That's how Dale Earnhardt died.
Yeah.
It could have been me.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Any other cool Earnhardt stuff other than?
No, but I got a good story about Dale Roderick. We're in the garage area, and it's just before qualifying, and all of us are just standing around, and there's 2 or 3 of my guys, and Daryl's washing the windshield on his race car, the number 11 Budweiser car, and so I'm one garage over, and I go, "Hey, Daryl, when you're done there, can you get the windshield on my car?" And Daryl says, "Sure, boss. I'll take care of it, boss. I'm coming, boss." So he's joking around, and I used to have in the back of my race car at Riverside, "Born in East LA."
Oh, okay, nice.
So Daryl comes over to us and says, "I know what that means in the back of your race car." I go, "What's that, Daryl?" He goes, "You were born in East Lower Alabama." And everybody laughed, right?
Right.
So I had just gotten this brand new pair of goggles, snow goggles, because you sweat so much, and they had a little fan in them, right?
Oh.
And Daryl he had been having some tough times getting to Riverside, and so I said, "Hey, Daryl, take a look at these." So I chuck them over to him, and he grabs them and he goes, "What is this?" I says, "Hit that button." He goes, "Oh!" He says, Rube, if I wore these, I'll bet you in the second lap, that little fan would come off and hit me right in the eyeball." True story.
Those guys, they had some long toes, as did the West drivers,
Yeah, oh yeah.
In 84, you did the whole season, right? Or 87?
Winston West.
The whole season.
The whole season.
That was a lot of travel for guys.
Yeah, it was an experience because I wasn't used to it. We never ended up having a decent car hauler. I ended up in the end. I bought somebody's cab over a truck. It had a 427 in it, and we ended up coming back from. Well, I ended up one of my drivers on the way back from might have been Reading or something overheated it, and we had We burned up one of the heads.
Killed it.
We had to change. In fact,
Everybody would have thought you were towing with some kind of beautiful motorhome everywhere or something.
No. We had our motorhome and we took it to some of the races. You know, we drove it all the way to Seattle. In fact, I didn't drive it. I had one of the guys take it up there. And then after one of the races up in Seattle, we drove it all the way home, and we stopped at Carmel and all the way, you know, all kinds of different places. It was really a lot of fun. I had the whole family, the wife and the kids, you know, and it was a lot of fun.
That's what's amazing. Even the elders talk about that. How the kids, you know, everybody would take their kids. And
you know, the one thing about Winston West is that you couldn't find a better bunch of race car drivers and families. I mean, it wasn't only the Minties, the Stewarts, you know, the McRaes, you know, the elders. Just everyone was so. Even if we didn't get along on the track, you
right.
know, we helped each other out.
Right.
Derek Cope trying Rookie of the Year. I was trying for Rookie of the Year in '84. He gets to Willow Springs. His car's illegal. The opening on the door, believe it or not, was, I think it was either too high. Yeah, it was too high, and we loaned them our welder to fix their car.
Right.
You know, they didn't have one with them. You know, we had a wire welder that we took with us. So, you know, everybody helped everybody. You know, it was a great family. After Coeur d'Alene, I'll never forget that. A whole bunch of us, must have been 30 or 40 of us, go to one of the rivers, and we were all swimming. You know, it was amazing. It was so much fun. Good people.
When I had some notes here I wanted to look at. So in '84, who would you take? Who was your crew?
Junior Baxter was.
So he became one of your.
He was the crew chief, and then I had Steve Chavez. He was one of the wheel guys, and then I had different parts of my family. My nephews were on my pit crew, and some of their friends, all young Hispanic guys, good-looking guys. We were. You know, a lot of guys liked us because we were always so friendly. All our crew, we were new to it. You know, we loved everybody.
Right.
And
you guys probably had the best pit food spread of ever.
We did.
I can imagine.
We go to Seattle, and we decided to SIR, Seattle International Raceway, and Petty's going to be there that day. You know, and we go there and we decide, you know, why don't we do something different? Why don't we? When we put up our easy ups, let's put a bunch of plants up there. So we went to a nursery and we bought a whole bunch of trees and stuff, and we put them around our car, you know. Well, that started it, and then pretty soon everybody else is doing that and putting easy ups up, you know. And when we in '84, a lot of guys didn't even have an easy up,
right?
You know,
right.
Just it was very basic. It was basic saga style racing, you know.
Right.
That day at SIR, I out-qualified Richard Petty. He was in one of Herschel McGriff's cars, and I qualified 9th, and he qualified 10th. And I'll never forget the first lap. We're going down the straightaway, but probably about 150 miles an hour or so, maybe 160. And I'm and Richard Petty is 3 feet from my rear bumper on a road course, right? And I'm looking in my rearview mirror, and all I can see is his face and that mustache. And I'm thinking, my God, you know, this is crazy.
Right.
So we go around the first time, I'm in first, I'm in 9th. We go around the second time, I'm in 9th. The 10th time he pulls up next to me. And we're going to go in the first left-hand sweeper, and I'm thinking, well, I can either let off or I can crash Richard Petty. And he had just won his 200th race, right? So I let off. I let him go. So we come around again on the 4th or 5th lap. We're getting to the end of the straightaway again, and I'm right on his bumper. He blows his motor, and there is oil all over my windshield. And this sweeper, we're going to take it at about 110, 120, and I'm thinking, oh man, we're done. How am I going to keep this race car on the racetrack? Because it was all oil. Because there's a big pile of tires, you know, maybe 15, 20 yards next to the track, and I'm holding on to dear life, and I made it. I ended up finishing 3rd that day, and Derek Cope finished 4th.
And who was 1-2?
Jim Bowen won, Richard, and then Jim Robinson was second.
Robinson.
Let me tell you something about Jim Bowen, and let me tell you about Winston West at Riverside and how they treated us. Jim Bowen was leading the race at Riverside, and his pit crew gets a call from NASCAR for him to move over for Richard Petty. And the pit crew's trying to figure out why. And they finally answer back, Jim Bowen is leading this race. Why do you want him to move over? True story.
Right.
And of course, he didn't win the race, but Jim Bowen was one hell of a racer.
I've heard a lot of stories about that, and then qualifying, messing with you guys so you didn't get as many laps in or as much qualifying.
What would happen is, and this is another good story, and probably one I shouldn't tell, but I've got to tell it because it needs to be told. So we would get there on Thursday, and they would start with inspection, and almost 100% of the Cup cars would pass inspection on Thursday night, Thursday at 5 o'clock. And Jim Robinson, Herschel McGriff, the 73 car, Bill Schmidt. Some of the top dogs would also pass inspection. But the newbies, and some of the other guys, we wouldn't even be able to practice on Friday or qualify on Friday because we weren't ready. They wouldn't pass our cars. Well, it was Bill Gazaway, I think, there was two Gazaways, Jim and Bill. One of them was in the offices and one was there, inspecting the cars. Well, one of the Gazaways was giving us trouble. So in 85, we were doing real well, and we were going to Riverside. And I go to Bob Swaney, who was the head of Winston West Racing, and I tell Bob, I says, Bob, I've decided to get an attorney, and we're gonna have an injunction at the Riverside race because of the way we're getting treated. I think that I'm being discriminated because I'm Hispanic, and this is all bullshit. This is a story I made up. And he says, well, don't do anything, let me see what I can do. So I wasn't going to do anything in the first place. I just wanted to see what would happen. I get to Riverside. We're outside because we weren't doing it. At that time, there was too many cars. We weren't in the garage area.
Yeah.
No, maybe we were. Anyways, this doesn't matter. And Gazaway comes over there. He crawls underneath my car. They're normally underneath your car for at least 15 minutes. He was underneath my car for maybe a minute and a half. He comes out, gets the little sticker, sticks it on my windshield. I had already passed inspection.
Amazing.
True story.
Yeah. Before you sponsored any races, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I ended up promoting 3 races. 2 at Willow Springs. One of them was with a partner, and one of them I did myself. And then I promoted a race at Mesa Marin, the Timex 500. Jim Thurkettle rented one of my cars, and his sponsor gave me $10,000 to rent my car. So that was part of the sponsorship for the race.
What was Timex? I remember I was on.
It was an oil-related company
okay.
out of Bakersfield. That was his Thurkettle's sponsor for many, many years. Thurkettle, great guy, good people. The other story, we rent the car, they load it on their trailer, and they're going down the 10 freeway to the 5 freeway. They get on the 5 freeway and they lose my race car into the center divider.
Off the trailer.
So
the whole trailer come off, or the car?
No, the car come off. So here they are.
The rental car.
And I've got to send Junior down to Silmar to work on the car just before the race. So I've got a different guy driving the hauler, and he's driving the hauler down the Great Line and loses control and has to go into that emergency
Oh, yeah.
The gravel pit.
At the same?
Same week.
Oh, my goodness.
So we get to the racetrack. We unload the car. The car's got gravel in the car.
Right.
I don't know how it got in there from the trailer. Oh, because it was an enclosed trailer. Crazy.
Were you guys lovers of anybody's chassis or platform, or you would build on anything?
No doubt. Oh, God. Ivan Baldwin was building a lot of race cars on the West Coast. And they built the cars. Well, my first car was a Buick Regal that was a Hutcherson Pagan car back east, and that the Lees had bought and brought out here. Good car, you know. You saw the picture.
Yeah.
Beautiful car. But after that, my other Monte Carlos were built by Ivan Baldwin. Jerry Baxter built the last one, and I love that car. Man,
he built Minties. He built a lot of cars.
We weren't the top draw. Winston West. Herschel was. Jim Robinson probably was. Derek Cope, of course, was, because we're in Tacoma. And but we were the type of guys that the track wasn't finished, and the officials there told us, man, we need some help. What can we do? Well, take this section over here, you know, help us put up the fence. We were there putting up the fence.
Right.
And the TV cameras were there. And of course, we're getting all the publicity.
Right.
So that day, one of the top dogs in Winston West gets interviewed, and it's all negative. Oh, the track should have been ready, and you know. And they interviewed me. And I was, man, we're going to race tomorrow, and we're going to win, and we're so happy. We were happy to work on the racetrack, you know, because that's the kind of guys we are.
Right.
So guess whose interview gets played on TV? Us.
Oh yeah, NASCAR loved to control that spin, right?
Sure.
They wanted that.
Well, and that's one thing that you always had to do. You know, NASCAR took advantage of promoters, took advantage of car owners, took advantage of race car drivers. But in the end, we all wanted to be part of it, and you had to understand that that's the way the game is played.
Right.
You know, I lost a ton at Willow Springs. I mean, I lost more than $50,000 for that race. But you know, I don't have any regrets.
How did you lose? I know you put the money up.
Well, the sanction fee was $26,000, I think, at the time.
Directly to NASCAR.
That went to NASCAR. You know, the track, they were glad to have us. You know, and having all the brochures and tickets printed up and just on, and we only got like 20-some hundred people to the racetrack. You know, and I gave away probably 10,000 tickets and didn't see. I'll bet you we didn't see 1,000 of those people there.
So you mean the sanctioning money didn't go to all the tickets and the posters? See, people.
No,
even
Winston.
Today it's crazy.
Winston would come up and do a lot.
That's
They
a
would
different
put a lot
story.
of posters. They would help with some of the radio advertising and so on and so forth. You know. But
who was the Winston guy back then? Was it Ralph Seagraves?
I don't remember. He was the big shot, but that wasn't the guys that we dealt with. We dealt with the real clean cut, mid-20s guys, super nice. You know, Winston always treated me very, very well. You know, I didn't have
Winston was this.
I miss those guys.
Without Winston, the sport.
No, not in California. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, lucky you said that, because Winston wasn't even going to come on board with NASCAR without California, without Riverside, because they already had Tobacco Row. They already had the Carolinas. They needed. And I'll tell you something, I don't even know if you know this, but I talked to Ralph Seagrave's son, and back then they were already doing demographics, hand demographics. So when they would sell tobacco at a liquor store, they would give the owner of the liquor store a statistic sheet, and the owner of the liquor store at that time would check off Hispanic bought this, and Black would buy this, and Caucasian would buy. So they already knew, and they knew that the Hispanic market was going to be the largest growing tobacco market, because they were doing all this statistical analysis manually. So we're going to get close to wrapping it up. But I mean, so we come into Mesa Marin, 1985, you had never won a race. You got close a couple times. Your family doesn't go to the racetrack with you. Your pops is ill. You sponsored that race too, right? No, the second one. The second one. So I read about, and I've been in this situation where, you just emotionally overcome in the car, and so you're racing at Mesa Marin, not on a road course, which is where you're really comfortable. Mesa Marin, big, fast, half-mile track. There were some younger guys there. I saw Kenke was in that race. He was probably a young up-and-coming.
Mike was a great guy.
Young up-and-coming guy. Walk me through the last 5-10 laps of that race. Who was your spotter?
Ron Esau. Well, first of all, I qualified third and had a good handling car. Jim Bound qualified second, but they found mercury in his frame rails, which was. I heard the next day when we had the hazmat people in there that there was enough mercury in one of his frame rails that they could have wiped out Bakersfield if it would have caught on fire. All of Bakersfield.
Crazy.
And man, I was so worried because, when that was the second race. Now that I think about it, it was not the first race; it was the second race. And anyways, let's go back to the race itself.
The first race. Here you go.
Yeah, 19 laps to go. I'm running first. Let's back up.
Okay.
It's lap about 100, and I finally managed to get around Herschel. I went out. I passed him on the outside. Just cooled my tires. Passed him on the outside. My car was handling really, really great. So about lap 110, I go over the radio. I go, Ron, I am so tired. I'm falling asleep.
Oh, like that kind of tired?
Yes. And Ron says, Ruben, are you crazy? You're winning this race. You get your shit together. So I says, Ron, just every 8-9 laps, just wake me up. Tell me anything you want. Cuss at me. I don't care. So with 19 laps to go, I'm running first. Jim Bound's running second. And he's right on my tail. And I don't know that he's actually technically a lap down, because when the race started, he didn't start on the grid. He started in the pits because he was dumping that mercury. Okay? So here I am, I'm driving, and finally Jim's got me. He's coming around me on the outside, and we're coming out of turn 2, and I try to put him in the wall. Because it was either I was going to win or we were going to crash. So Jim's smart enough, he's raced enough, he backs off, and we just come around and go around, and I end up winning.
And that was was any of your family at that race?
My family, including my sons were there, 3 of them. Anyways, my wife, Jack Sneed was there, which he helped me so much in my race career. His wife, some of the other people from Suncrest, and a lot of our fans. But my dad was at St. Vincent's, and he was dying. I took the award to the hospital the next day. And I showed him the award, and I told him, Dad, this race, I won this race. This race was for you. And all they could say, because he had tubes and everything, he just mouthed the word good. And he died 3 days later.
Sorry to hear that, Ruben. I see the emotion on your face, but there's a lot of pride there too. A culmination of.
The sad part about that interview at the end of the race is I forgot to thank my sponsor, Suncrest. Just all I could think about was my dad.
That's not sad, Ruben. But that's the kind of guy you are. I know you an hour, 2 hours, and I know what kind of person you are, and and I'm sure your dad was proud, and I'm sure. I mean, Suncrest Motorhome, it was your own company. It was your Jack's company. You didn't have to.
Me and my brother Oscar and Jack owned it all.
Yeah, you probably thank them every day of the week. Are you in the West Coast Stock Car Hall of Fame?
No, I don't think I'll ever get there. Ken Clapp never liked me. He never did. He just used me.
I'm glad you said that part.
It's the truth. You don't have to broadcast that part, but it's the truth.
Do you care if I broadcast that part?
Nope. Because they'll never put me in.
Did you know Bob Barkheimer?
No, I didn't. That was his partner. No.
Well, that wasn't really his partner. I'm going to be doing a couple separate podcasts on what really happened on the West Coast, because some of my trips back east I've heard and been asked not to say people's names for things, and also I talked to some people that were in the Seagraves clan that told me the real story of how things went down in the West, and why the points are buried, and why the drivers were treated certain ways, and why Ken Clapp gets all the glory, but he wasn't even the guy. I mean, factually, NASCAR couldn't even get a race west of the Mississippi without going through Bob Barkheimer or Agajanian. And then they kind of were snowed by some other guys, and like you
Who's
said.
the guy that started the West Coast Hall of Fame?
Tim Meyer.
Yeah. Have you spoken to Tim?
Funny story do you know Tim?
I know him. I met him before. I've gone to a few of the West Coast Hall of Fame banquets and stuff, but I've never sat down and talked to him.
So, knowing that the West has been screwed, let's just say it, knowing that your legacies are, what really ticks me off the most is that your legacies are buried into the ARCA Menard series. And as we look at the ARCA Menard series today, we see that the kids in ARCA Menard's cars are a bunch of young kids that are in rental cars. They're kind of spoiled kids. Something's going on here. And you guys were grown-ass men that were racing and working and taking care of your families. And sometimes you were up north 3 or 4 days a week and all kinds of stuff going on.
Sometimes we wouldn't come home. It'd be 3 weeks, three weeks up there.
Exactly. So it upsets me that at a minimum, West isn't just by itself under the record books. The other thing that upsets me is a lot of the West drivers didn't get credit towards Cup wins, but the Cup drivers did. They got full credit for their Cup wins. When you look at Richard Petty's 200 list, he won races that Insolo maybe won here. No credit. Ray Elder, no credit. I mean, imagine Ray Elder not being in the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
It's terrible.
I think that Herschel was
travesty.
Herschel was their token. Herschel's in now.
He deserves it. Yep.
He does, but it shouldn't stop there. And the fact that you're not in the West Coast Hall of Fame is a travesty. And
talk to Joe Nava.
I know Joe personally.
He believes I belong in the Hall of Fame.
You may belong in both of them, if you ask me, because it's not the NASCAR Winston Cup Hall of Fame. It's the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And they're starting to put some people in the Hall of Fame that are average, in my opinion, right? Look at Jimmy Insolo, the impact he's had on the sport. With Petty wouldn't have won his 7th championship without Insolo beating Waltrip at Riverside and some stuff like that. And have you talked to Richard Petty or met Petty since,
No, I haven't talked to him. The last time I saw Richard Petty was probably at a SEMA show, and it was probably a good 6-7 years after I had stopped racing.
So it's interesting. So Kyle does his charity ride that comes, So last year, Kyle's charity ride stopped in Cedar City. The Minties live up there, and so does Dave Reeves. And Dave Reeves is really tight with Insolo. And Insolo was my mom's favorite driver, and so thus my number was 38, and I loved Insolo. We took him to the Kyle Petty charity ride at the hotel, and Jimmy was carrying around this little box in his pocket, little flat jewelry box. So we get there, and Kyle was outside, Richard was nowhere to be found, and we finally get in line. We're in a line, and we get up to Kyle. There's hundreds of people in line, and it's Pat Menti Jr., myself, Dave Reeves, and Insolo. And one of us says to Kyle, "This is Jimmy Insolo." And Kyle yells out at the top of his lungs, "Jimmy effing Insolo? You're Jimmy effing Insolo?"
Wow.
And so now forever to be, from this day forward, he's Jimmy effing Insolo,
That's awesome.
right?
That's awesome.
And Jimmy goes, "Yeah." And Kyle goes, "Come inside. You guys are coming inside." Well, little did we know that Richard was inside, but they only let certain people inside. And we walked in, and before we went there the night before, we were bench racing with Jimmy, and Jimmy was down. We were talking about the disrespect of the West and his legacy, and kind of how you're like, yeah, it wasn't really cool. I'm not going to get in here. And Richard walks up, and Kyle goes, "This is Jimmy effing Insolo," to his dad. And Richard gets this big grin on his face and gives Jimmy this big hug, and they just start talking about Riverside, and Jimmy pulls out this box, and it has 2 lug nuts in it. And he says, "Do you know what these are?" And Richard says, "No." And he says, "These are the lug nuts from the race that I drove your car." And he goes, "When I got out of the car, I wanted some kind of a moment. I picked up these lug nuts."
That's awesome.
And I've had them in this box since that day. And it was just deafening to hear Jimmy carrying that in his heart and his soul. And will you sign the box? And inside of the box it said "The King's Nuts." That's what Jimmy wrote. And then Richard signed it.
Wow.
And the difference in Jimmy, and so I hope they stop there this year, because if they stop there this year, I'll come pick you up.
I'd love to go to Cedar City.
And take you to see him. So
I have to tell you a story about one of the West Coast Hall of Fames. Mike Waltrip walks up, and Daryl's there too. And Mikey walks up, and he remembers me, and we're talking, and there's Joe Novin and some other people there, and we're all BSing. And Mikey gives me, no, I'm sorry. No, yeah, it was Mike Waltrip. And he gives me his cell number, right? And so his personal cell number, he gives it to me, so we could talk and stuff. And then after the ceremonies were all over, everybody's getting up to go. I went over to say hi to Daryl, right? And Daryl's talking to some guy in a real nice suit, and I don't know who the guy is. So I wait for a good 5 minutes, Finally, Daryl's done with the guy, and I go, "Hey, Daryl, do you remember me?" He looks over at me, he says, "Ruben?" Dude, that was unbelievable. He gives me this hug, and Mikey might have already told him that I was here,
No, but you look, your facial.
And he gave me this hug, and man, it was unbelievable.
What did that mean to you, Ruben?
I mean, it meant a lot, man, everything,
Would,
to be part of all that.
Would you rather be in the Hall of Fame or have the King and guys like, if Earnhardt was alive, calling you Ruben Sandwich, or Darrell Waltrip turning around in a crowded room and saying "You're Ruben" and giving you a hug?
Now that means more. The West Coast Hall of Fame would be something. It would be something. I was on the board of directors for the West Coast Hall of Fame, and Ken kicked me out because I wasn't bringing any sponsors into it, and that's what Ken was all about. He used the people that would give money or get money for an event for something. The tables were, I don't remember what they were, $5,000 or something.
Yeah.
It was a lot of money, and I was just there to try and help them out all I could. But I wasn't even, I wasn't really wealthy at that time. So it is what it is,
So back to Tim Myers. So in my quest to find out what really is going on with the Winston West, I've ran into a lot of people, and nobody knows Tim Meyer was the guy that invented and opened the West Coast Hall of Fame. He got screwed by him too, right? But everybody thinks Ken Clapp in all the books you read, in all the promotions. Oh, it's Ken Clapp's, and that's not true.
That's not true.
So I had posted something on the Winston West Facebook page to get some info, and this guy Tim Meyer messages me, and kind of the same thing that happened to you, where I thought you were still. I was going to California. I'm going to interview Ruben Garcia, and you tell me you're in Henderson. Tim Meyer gets a hold of me, and I go, I really want to talk to you because I want to know the truth. He goes, I was in the meetings. I was a writer. I was in the hauler. I was in the trailer. I know everything, right? He's 80-something years old. And so I'm like, where can I come meet you or whatever? And he says, he was like a mile from me.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I'm like, oh, we have to have lunch. I was just at his house last week.
Wow.
He gave me an original Grand National Winston West sign and he has all kinds of memorabilia, but he also has the truth about what happened, and so does Ralph Seagrave's son, Colbert Seagrave. So now you got me wound up, Ruben.
No. Yeah, it is what it is.
We, this has just been a great experience for me. I can understand why my mom loved you. I love you now. We might have to do another one of these podcasts.
Anytime,
Or go play around the golf together.
I probably have a lot of memories that I didn't even think about, but...
we can do 2, 3. We can go play golf. We can... you're that kind of guy that you just want to jump in with and go play around a golf or go have a beer with at a casino or.
There you go.
So I appreciate you. I appreciate your service to this great nation. I appreciate how candid you've been, your emotions. I'm an emotional guy too. I appreciate the sacrifices that your folks made to come here to our country. Because without them, we wouldn't have a great guy like you. Thanks for being on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you.